I'm Fred Blackwell, and I think you'll see that soon. Been at the foundation for about 3.5 years and have spent my time in philanthropy, in local government, in nonprofits. I've had a bunch of different positions, but really one job, which is to really move the ball around the intersection of economic and racial justice in place. It's been really great to bring that perspective to the foundation. This is a little bit about us. We serve 5 counties. We spread a lot of money around those counties. We've done pretty well in terms of our investments and returns, but it also highlights the fact that we do both grant making and we help to facilitate the philanthropy of donors. We've looked at the data a lot and think about where we wanted to have an impact, and this is one of the first things that came out. We are the second most diverse region in the country, and I think a lot of folks who live and work in the Bay Area really appreciate that, and I think it's something to build on. But at the same time, when we also look at the data, what we see is that we are ground zero for the kind of toxic inequality that people see here locally, at the state level, at the national level, and globally. And so that creates a challenge. An example of that challenge in terms of trying to deal with this stuff is when you look at educational attainment. And what you can see here is that as you get more education, obviously your income rises. The disheartening thing is that the more education you get, the wider the income gap gets. And if you're Latino in the Bay Area, you can expect to make $9 per hour less than your white cohorts with the same level of education. We think that this work is important from a moral and ethical point of view, but we also think it's important from an economic point of view. What this slide points out is that if we were just to close the racial income gap, there'd be $117 billion more circulating in the Bay Area economy. So we think that this is a moral imperative and an economic imperative. The other thing that we did, in addition to looking at data, though, is we actually went out and talked to folks. We did meetings throughout the Bay Area to ask people what their perspectives were and what kinds of trends, positive and negative, they saw. But we also talked to practitioners, folks that were on the ground as well, and all of that stuff really led us to the conclusion that we needed to be focusing in on a North Star that was about creating a greater level of racial and economic inclusion at a regional level of scale. And in response to that, we blew up the way that we were organized before and decided to organize ourselves around what we think the pathways to equity are, which are people, place, and power. The people work, we really decided to center ourselves around a body of work called Improving Access to Opportunity, which is about removing both physical and systemic barriers to opportunity, but also about raising the floor for low-wage workers and creating a greater sense of upward economic mobility. In addition to the people work, we also focused in on anchoring communities as a representation of our work around place, which is really about the recognition that where you live can either be a springboard to opportunity or a sentence to the lack thereof, and are really focused in on that area of work around housing, anti-displacement, and a variety of other issues that you can imagine. The third piece around power, we created a body of work called Nurturing Equity Movements. It is about the recognition that you can have all the great ideas you want around people in place, but if it's not connected to a constituency of people who are demanding change, it won't happen at the level of scale or the level of sustainability that we think is important. Here, what you can see, you'll eventually be able to see is how our grant making has changed in response to this new body of work. The average grant size at the San Francisco Foundation is now at about $80,000, and it used to be about $25,000, so it really represents a significant change there. We've also moved to greater levels of multi-year support. You can see that almost half of our grants now are multi-year, and most of the grants that are going out of the door are going to people and organizations led by people of color. But in addition to kind of changing the way that we were doing grant making, we also put together new products. We launched a rapid response fund in the early part of 2017. It got a lot of recognition in terms of a response to the election, but we really thought it was more of a response to what we were hearing from the field in terms of the kinds of things that were needed for folks who were doing movement building work. Just a little bit of the statistics here. I won't go through all of them. You can see the number of applications, the number of grants, the total amount of money that's gone out through the Rapid Response Fund, but I really wanted to point your attention to the kinds of issues that people who are working on who are receiving support from the fund. You can see a lot of it aligns with things that we heard earlier in the presentation today. But for us, the focus on equity is more than about grant making. We also think that it's important for us to interact with our donors in different ways, and we have donors that have really been stepping up to the plate to think about and support things that are happening around immigration, around criminal justice issues, around other issues that folks are working on. And we also think it's important for us to bring our own civic leadership and our voice. So in addition to grant making and working with donors, we think that sometimes it's appropriate to bring our voice to the debate as well, trying not to step on the toes of the folks that we're working with, but really thinking about how we can bring our civic leadership and our partnerships to the work as well. In terms of what next, there's three things. One is we're really focusing a lot on results. We think it's one thing to be able to do this work and have a lot of activity going on. It's another thing to be able to talk about who's better off as a result. We are also trying to figure out how we can better align the 95% of our resources that are around investment around the equity agenda as well. Lastly, if you want to know more about the people, place, and power work, who we're supporting and how we're supporting them, you can go to our website, www.sff.org. Thank you.